Hello and welcome to the talk show, and today is the first video in a series about the UK's general elections. Today we start with the 1832 general election.
I decided to start with the 1832 general election because it was the first after the Reform Act of 1832. To put the 1832 general election into context, we need to look at 1831 and the Duke of Wellington.
During his premiership, the Duke of Wellington had made some changes. One of his greatest achievements was Catholic emancipation, where Catholics were given by the state pretty much complete civil rights where they had previously been discriminated against. However, he held back progress in pretty much everything else. The Duke was opposed to almost all reform, including increased suffrage. He wanted the elites and landed gentry to have control of the UK and no one else. This led to massive protest against him when unemployment in rural areas started to climb. His popularity fell in office because he pushed so hard against any reform of the outdated system that the UK ran on. So, in a general election in 1831, the Whigs, a political party, not the artificial hair, under the leadership of Earl Grey, received a landslide victory, beating the Duke of Wellington and his Tory party out of Downing Street. And then, after their general election victory, they tried with some difficulty to push through the 1832 Reform Act, which then gave significantly more people the right to vote when it passed.
The 1832 Reform Act had expanded the number of people eligible to vote by about 40%. Before the Reform Act, only about 509,000 people could vote, which was just under 6% of the population. Afterwards, around 8% of adults could vote. This doesn't seem like much, but the Reform Act had also gotten rid of rotten boroughs, which had a large impact.
Before this, rotten boroughs were very common. They were constituencies which had lots of land in them, and that land was owned by either the landed gentry, aristocracy, or the crown. These constituencies had very, very few people living in them, and so the MP who represented them in Parliament would actually do what the landowner told them to. Otherwise, in the next general election, they would simply be gotten rid of by whoever owned that land in the constituency. There were 140 of these constituencies in Parliament out of 650 seats in total, and 50 of these rotten boroughs had fewer than 50 voters in them. The Whigs then called an election immediately after the reform, which was the 1832 general election.
So, who was running? Well, in the blue corner there was the Duke of Wellington for the Tory party, and in the yellowy-orange corner was Earl Grey for the Whig party. The Tories had been the dominant party for decades, with the Whigs only getting into power very rarely.
The Tories stood for tradition and against reform. They wanted the elites to stay in power and didn't want any expansion of voting rights or human rights that we would now take for granted. However, the Whigs stood on a platform of reform and change in the UK, giving the rights and increased quality of life that the ordinary people in the UK desperately wanted. There was, however, a third party, the Irish Repeal Party, which was led by Daniel O'Connell. They only stood in Ireland, and they wanted to repeal the Union Act of 1801, which meant that Ireland was part of the UK. They had significant support in Ireland because the people of Ireland wanted more independence and more say over what happened in their country.
So, the results are in, and it's a landslide victory for the Whigs. They received 67% of the vote and 441 seats. The Tories were crushed, receiving 29.2% of the vote and only 175 seats. The Irish Repeal Party took 42 seats and 3.8% of the vote. So let's have a look at the map. Well, I want to start with Ireland there, or the island of Ireland on the left. So you can see that the Irish Repeal Party does relatively well in the south, not perfectly. The Whig Party pick up a few seats, and there are hatched constituencies there with lines going through them for the Repeal and Whig parties. So the Repeal and Whig Party are the dominant parties. I'll explain what the lines through the constituencies mean in a bit. But you can see in Northern Ireland, pretty much where the border is today, there is definitely Conservative dominance. Almost all of the constituencies, in fact all of the constituencies that I can see, have at least one Conservative MP elected there, or all of the MPs there are Conservative. So, clear dividing line, you can see, that's been there for centuries now. So let's go over to Scotland as well. The slightly different colours between the orange of the Whig Party in the south and the yellow of the Whig Party in Scotland, they're the same party. But you can see, again, relatively reminiscent of what the electoral map looks like today in the UK and Scotland. You can see definitely in that northeastern corner where the Conservatives do well now, the Conservatives were doing well all of these hundreds of years ago as well, which I think is very interesting. And then going to look at England and Wales, you can see that the Whigs are definitely dominating there. They either get they have lots and lots of support in England and lots of support in Wales as well, especially in the south and southeast. The Whigs do very well. Now, I want to explain what the lines through the constituencies mean, because you see lots of them have sort of blue and orange lines through them, and that's because those constituencies have more than one MP elected, and say they had 2 MPs elected, one of them would be a Whig MP and one of them would be a Conservative MP. So both parties have been elected from one constituency. So they have, lines to show that of the 2 different colours.
During Earl Grey's time in office, he brought through some really big changes. Of course, we've already heard about the 1832 Reform Act, but after the 1832 general election, he abolished slavery in the British Empire in 1833, and he reduced the number of hours of child labour that was allowed. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.